Hello, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center where He belongs, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. I am your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I'm a servant of God. We'll skip the bio today. I'll just say, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. There are plenty of other podcasts with a bio in it if you want to know more about me. Today we're going to talk about shooting qualifications, and specifically shooting qualifications that don't apply to you. Obviously, if you've been military or police, as I have, you have certain qualifications that you must meet. Whether that's U.S. Marine Corps rifle qualification or U.S. Army pistol qualification, or let's say LAPD qualification at different intervals with different scores. But I would surmise that the vast majority of the audience are civilians, concealed carriers, modern-day crusaders, a well-regulated militia that stands ready to defend himself and others against many different possible threats. So what would be the benefit or benefits to the average citizen for shooting these qualifications? Or for somebody that has a certain qualification, let's say Army, shooting a different qual, such as an LAPD qual? Well, I'd say there are a lot of different benefits to that. I think we all have this tendency as shooters to practice the things that we're good at. Well, qualifications, and especially different qualifications, can cause you to practice things that you're not good at, or practice things that you wouldn't ordinarily practice. Now, I'll throw out for instance, last week I shot the FBI qualification, first time I shot that in a while. Now, I am an FBI certified firearms instructor, handgun instructor, but I'm not required to shoot that anymore. So why did I go back and shoot that? Because I hadn't shot it in a while, and I'm sure there were some skills on there that I hadn't been practicing as much as I probably could. The very first stage on that is draw, fire 3 rounds, strong hand only, switch to your non-dominant hand and fire 3 rounds, weak hand only, or left-handed. I don't remember whether to specify dominant or non-dominant or right or left. But you shoot 3 rounds with one hand and then switch and shoot 3 rounds with the other hand in 6 seconds at 3 yards. Now, that's not a super high degree of accuracy drill for marksmanship, but it is a good drill for footwork and switching from dominant to non-dominant hand, drawing with one hand only, body position. It's good for a lot of those things, and it was a good reminder to practice those skills. And that's just one small example. Now, just me as an example, I've shot that qual many times. I almost always shoot a perfect score. Well, last week when I shot it, I didn't shoot a perfect score. I didn't miss at all. In fact, my accuracy was very good. I was very pleased with it. But I held 1 round on one of the stages. And I had been noticing that in some other training as well. I can shoot super fast. I can shoot super accurate. But in those middle distances, let's say, 5 rounds in 5 seconds at 15 yards, the balancing in the middle of the speed and accuracy, I was a little bit slower than I needed to be. I was 0.13 seconds slower on that stage on my last round, which means it doesn't count. It's, 5 rounds in 5 seconds. So I was 1 round shy on that qualification. Meaning I held 1 round, meaning it didn't count. Which is fine, but that's a good identifier of things to work on. That balancing of speed and accuracy. And I don't know what that's going to be for you, but the point is that you may not know that either. That old cliche, you don't know what you don't know. Well, if you don't practice those skills, you don't really know how good you should be at them. And not that the FBI qualification or any other qualification is the end-all, be-all. You should never be like, oh, I passed, so I'm good. You should always be striving to be better, but it will help identify some deficiencies and things you need to work on. I think that is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, benefits of shooting qualifications that may not apply to you. Forcing you to get out of your comfort zone. Or, we all fall into this trap, I think, especially, I can identify this myself, as thinking that most people are like me. And then I look around and realize that most people are not like me. Now, I don't have a TV and I'm not political. I don't watch the news like any of the big mainstream news channels. But a lot of that's an echo chamber. And then people get into that watching whatever it is, and they go out and meet people that aren't like them and like, well, how can they think like that? Well, because not everybody's like you. And to get back to the main topic, I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life, and I think that most people train and push themselves the way that I do, especially in, whether it's Bible reading or physical strength or shooting, pushing themselves to be the best that they can be. But I've recently been blessed to be the general manager of a firearms and training company, and it made me realize that most people are not like me. A lot of people just buy a gun. And a lot of people just buy a gun and throw up a giant silhouette target at 3 yards or 5 yards. And with no time limit, no time constraints, no different skills, they put the target up and they shoot a couple of rounds. They're like, oh, I hit the target, 50% of the time. I'm good. I'm good to go. Well, you may be armed at that point, but you're not effective. You're not, a modern-day crusader, a modern Minuteman. And there's a time and a place to just go to the range and just turn money into noise. Just to have fun with your friends and things like that. I should probably do that more. But don't make the mistake of thinking that is training. Because that's not training. That's turning money into noise. That may be at best function checking to make sure that your weapon works. But that is not, I repeat, that is not training. And you don't have to shoot somebody else's criteria for qualifications for training. You can make up your own. Like, I have my own standards that I hold myself to, and they are far above any qualification that I've seen. But I still think it's beneficial to shoot other people's qualifications. Like I said, to get you out of that comfort zone. If you're just going to the range, once you've practiced your fundamentals of marksmanship, which I think should always be the foundation, then maybe pull up a qualification on your phone and practice it and see what skills on there you don't normally practice. Maybe you don't generally practice a tactical reload with magazine retention. Maybe you ought to start practicing that, because that might be on a qual that you pull up. Maybe for whatever reason you don't practice what I would call a drive down drill, like 4 rounds center mass in quick succession. And maybe you always practice, a Mozambique drill, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. That's one of my standard drills. But there's a time for what I would call a drive down response. 4 to 6 rounds center mass in quick succession. As in, somebody's running at you with a knife. Probably not the time to go to a headshot when somebody's sprinting full bore at a 45-degree angle towards you or towards somebody else. That's probably the time for a drive down response. 4 to 6 rounds center mass as quick as you can get them. And that's a skill that makes you up on a qualification. And if you want to do this, if there's something you practice all the time and it's on the qual, and you just want to practice different things, maybe look on the qual and look for things that you don't practice and just shoot those stages. Like I mentioned, the FBI drill, the first stage, draw, fire 3 rounds, strong hand only switch, fire 3 rounds, weak hand only in 6 seconds. Maybe that's a thing you don't practice all the time, so practice it. Or maybe you do practice your strong to weak hand transitions a lot, so don't practice that. Maybe you need to practice on your accuracy with your strong and weak hand only. Look for a stage that emphasizes that. It's good to have your own standards and your own plan and your own training regimen, but it's also good to look outside and see maybe some things that you don't need to be a staple in your training regimen, but that you should practice from time to time. Here's another big benefit. If you go out to the range with a buddy or two, there's nothing wrong with good, healthy, manly competition. Having a couple of guys that go out and say, okay, guys, how about today we run the, LAPD qual, for instance, and we'll see how we do on it. Because the second you do that, most men are going to want to do better and push themselves better, which is going to cause stress. And stress is probably going to be a major factor in any real-world first-hand shooting. I speak from experience. Just like in any real-world shooting or any real-world gunfight that I've been in, very similar to competition in that manner, in that there is a different kind of stress, but there is a much different amount of stress than just putting a target up at 5 yards with no time limit and just seeing what happens. The amount of stress induced by its very nature can be helpful and more realistic than just going out and shooting at cans or whatever. So I would say that would be another benefit. And again, going back to going out and training with a couple of buddies, here is perhaps another, hopefully will never come into play, but could be even more important than the things that we talked about. If you go out with a couple of buddies, a couple of witnesses, if you are, let's say, your concealed carry holder, your modern day Minuteman that stands ready, if you have one or two witnesses that can run you through an FBI qual and witness it and take a picture of that target and stand up in court and say, yes, we shot the FBI qualification to FBI standards, 3 months ago. If you did, ever find yourself in court, you could show some level of proficiency. That is the reason that when I was a full-time law enforcement instructor and FBI certified firearms instructor, that is the reason for the qual. It wasn't necessarily to prove how good a shot you were. It was to prove on paper, in court, that you met a certain standard. Now, we could argue whether or not those standards are good enough, and I would say that they're probably not. But to the average, person on a jury of your peers, if you say, I shot the FBI qualification and exceeded the FBI standard, 3 months ago, and here are my two witnesses that are willing to testify on my behalf. Here is a picture of the target, or better yet, save the target until the next one that you shoot. This is what the FBI holds their people to, and I passed that as a concealed carrier. Then that could be a good thing to have in your corner if you ever had to go to court. I would say if that is your goal, kind of the standard is the FBI qualification. I would say shoot that FBI qualification to the same standards, and hopefully you do far better than just passing that. But shoot it to that standard. I would say start there, and then if you wanted another one, look to your state or local law enforcement, and shoot their qual. That would be the next place to go. That way you could say, whatever the local jurisdiction is here, I shoot that same qual, and I passed it. So I'm at least as proficient as the police officer that polices our city has to be. Or the state one would be another good one. You're in the state of Arizona, and you shoot the Arizona post-qualification and say, I'm at least as good and meet the standards that the police department, the police in our state have to pass. That would be another big benefit of shooting qualifications, that you don't necessarily have to shoot or pass. Getting your concealed carry permit is great, but a lot of states, and I don't think there should be, I think every state should be constitutional carry. If you want to be an armed citizen, you should be an armed citizen. But you consider it your responsibility to be well armed and well regulated. And I don't want that regulation to fall into the hands of the state. So you ought to take it upon yourself as a man to be well regulated, to be well trained. Most concealed carry classes or states' concealed carry curriculums don't even have some kind of qual like that. Some do, but many don't. So just having something that you can stand up and say, yes, I meet this standard. Just a quick aside on that. I mean, we live in the era now where you have a recorder on your phone. If you're not comfortable with having your friends testify in court, you could literally record yourself shooting it in real time and upload it somewhere to some server and have it backed up somewhere. where you could do that in addition to your witnesses. And moving on from that, I would say if you do want to shoot some quals, some ones that I know and some ones that I think are good, like I would say if you haven't shot any at all, start out with the FBI qual. It's not super hard to pass. It is based on, real world shooting statistics, I believe. It is a good benchmark for being a competent gun handler. I would say start and look up the FBI qual. It's free in the public domain. You can look it up on your phone right now or whatever device you're listening to this on. You can likely look up the FBI qualification. It's 50 rounds. In fact, most of these quals are going to be 50 rounds or less. If you want a marksmanship, a good, really not much else comes out of this qual, but a good fundamentals of marksmanship, try qualing and then try shooting expert on the U.S. Army pistol qualification. It's all done at 25 yards. There's not a lot of gun handling, gun fighting stuff. I'd say it's less practical for real-world gunfighting, but it's more practical on mastering the fundamentals. On that, another good one that most people can practice, most people that go out and shoot can find a 25-yard or 25-meter range. And at 25 meters versus yards is academic, really. But most people, if they go shooting, have access to at least a 25-meter range. The U.S. Army has an alternate rifle qualification that's all done at 25 yards. You can buy the targets on Amazon. I just bought some. And you can get the paper qualification for the U.S. Army for the M16, M4 service rifle. And you can go shoot that yourself, all done at 25 yards to the same time standards. It's not beyond reach of a normal person to go out and shoot that. So if you want to practice, like I said, some skills you may not always practice. If you always go and shoot off a bench, maybe buy one of those targets and look that up. You could even shoot it with a semi-automatic 22, because at 25 meters, external ballistics are kind of an academic argument as far as practicality goes. Like I said, go out with your buddies and challenge them to shoot, instead of just going out and shooting clay targets on a bank with your AR, which is fun. Be like, hey, I bought these targets. You guys want to shoot the U.S. Army qualification at 25 meters. It will give you some competition. It will give you some level of stress. But those are good places to start. I also like the LAPD qualification. LAPD qual is probably one of the most practical quals. I know I didn't include the bio in this, but I used to be LAPD, and I've shot many quals, but the LAPD is a good one. It's the only one that I know of that you fire at two different targets with fairly good time limits, meaning you can't be slow. And let's face it, in today's world, a lot of times there are multiple threats and multiple attackers. So looking at the FBI police qual would be a good one to look at and shoot. Some of the Las Vegas Metro Academy qual is decent and a hard one to shoot a perfect score on. It's a good mix of real-world gunfighting skills and marksmanship. The Arizona Post qualification, I just shot that, I think 2 weeks ago, because I live in Arizona now, so I figured that would be a good one to have under my belt and witnessed. It was a good one. Like I said, if you just want to practice different quals and try different quals, I would look at that one. It had some things that were good on there that I hadn't seen on other quals. And there's any number of qualifications for different agencies, whether it's air marshals or, your local, state fish and game, whatever qual they have to qualify on. Any number, look on there. Check them out. See if there's anything you can glean from those quals. If you have your own group of men, if you are in charge of training, or you want to, have a standard for your church security group or whatever, I would encourage you to shoot, like I said, first and foremost, the FBI qual or your local agency qual. That way you can use that in court and people will know what that is. But you can always go in and pull, this stage from this qual and this stage from this qual, because it pertains more to what you're going to be doing, and use those and glean from those and make your own qualification. When I was the commander of a special response team, an active shooter response team, I made my guys shoot the U.S. Army pistol qual, the U.S. Army rifle qual, the FBI qualification, and our local law enforcement qualification, in addition to our own proprietary qualification that they had to pass. As professional gunfighters, I expected them to step up any day, cold, meaning without practice, and step up and even on their worst day, pass those quals. Again, the qualifications I don't think are like the ultimate test of awesome marksmanship ability, whether that's rifle or handgun or anything else. I don't think that, and I don't think they I really don't like the people in law enforcement agencies or whatever that are just happy to pass. And I think the standards are generally way too low on those quals. But I think that there's still a lot that we can get from shooting those qualifications and training on those quals. Even quals that we don't necessarily have to pass. Even quals, like I said, that don't pertain to us. Even quals as an ordinary concealed carrier. I hope that you see it as your responsibility as a man to step up and be able to, on any given day, protect yourself and those around you, to love your neighbor as yourself, to protect life. To be that modern day crusader. To carry a sword and know how to use it. With that, man, I'm going to wrap up the body of this episode. If you're thinking, I like this message, I like this podcast, I want more, go to goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. It's kind of your one-stop shop for that. There's more stuff on there, other podcasts that we do, the Alpha Male podcast, the important stuff, Simple Man sermons, merchandise, ways to support if you want other men to be able to hear this message. Again, goodshepherdtraining.com, kind of designed to be your one-stop shop if you want more. With that, I'll say thanks for listening to this episode. I'll throw in a tactical tip, as we're accustomed to do here. Tactical tip is this: in addition to all the other benefits that we listed for shooting qualifications, another one can be bringing out deficiencies in your gear. Like we talked about, a lot of people just go and put up a silhouette target and get in their normal shooting stance at 5 yards and shoot a couple of rounds. It's one thing for your gun to work in those conditions. It's another for it to work when you're in a rush and you're shooting one hand only and you didn't get a proper grip on the pistol, again, because you were rushed, and seeing if your pistol functions properly like that, or your rifle functions properly under any number of conditions. A tactical tip to kind of help that and prove that out is, I've been harping for a while on, you got to train, you have to shoot with your ammunition you're going to use in the real world. Maybe not all the time, but enough to know that it works, whether that's with a rifle or a handgun or a shotgun or whatever. I'm big on making sure that it shoots the same point of aim, point of impact, and also making sure that it functions in your gun. It's one thing for a gun to work with 124 grain, NATO ball rounds. And it's another, it may not work with whatever super fancy hollow point that you have. So test that out. And a tactical tip of the day is, when you're shooting one of these quals, make the first 1 or 2 rounds and the last 1 or 2 rounds in the magazine your duty ammunition, or I guess duty is the wrong word, your real-world defensive ammo choice. In general, and not always, but in general, if you're going to have a malfunction, it's with the first couple rounds because you have the most amount of magazine pressure in that magazine and on that firearm and in that firing cycle. Or the last 1 or 2 rounds, because again, you have the least amount of pressure on that magazine and forward momentum on those rounds in the firing cycle. So the tactical tip is, when you're running these quals, if you want to shoot 50 rounds of your duty ammunition for the qual, go ahead and do that. But if you want to test whether your ammunition works and don't want to shoot the whole 50 rounds, as long as you know and have tested that your duty ammo and practice ammo shoots the same point of aim, point of impact, then make the first couple rounds and the last couple rounds in that magazine your duty ammunition, because that's the most likely place that it's going to give you an issue. And if it works fine there, it's probably good to go. Continuation on that tactical tip. Hopefully we're all dry firing every day. Hopefully we're all carrying our gun every day. If you're using a semi-automatic, when you load and unload and load and unload, you can get a thing called round setback. And for round setback, That is when you load and unload a round several times in a row, you can start to set that round back. Make sure you inspect your rounds for that, but what I like to do is every time I load and unload that, or most times when I load and unload that, when I'm getting ready to dry fire, I'll mark that round and put it in my backup magazine. And then once I've loaded and unloaded that round a few times, because I put a little mark on the back of the case with a Sharpie, part of my EDC, I'll set that round aside. And then that can be the round, as long as you don't notice or see any visual round setback or the round is not loose in the case, use those rounds as the rounds you use to test out periodically your duty ammunition to make sure that it still works. Anyway, that's a tactical tip for the day. And the tactical verse of the day will be the beginning of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any likeness of anything that is in the heavens above or the earth beneath or the waters under the earth. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Don't make anything an idol. Not guns, not ammo, not tactical stuff. No matter how many gunfights you win or lose, remember that in the end, only one thing is what you base your life on. Only one thing ultimately saves you. And that thing is God, and that Savior is Jesus Christ. Remember that. Get out there, gunfighters, and have a blessed day.